Was born, oddly enough, in Rota, Spain. Uh, English mother, Italian father. Came here. Pittsburgh is really where the bulk of my family here is from. Was a Northeasterner until I was about 7, then California bound. So we found the desert because my mother wanted somewhere for us to go to school that wasn't LA. Like, so they kind of took a trip, oddly enough, in February. My dad and my uncle were like, this is fucking beautiful. Holy shit, I can't even believe how beautiful it is. Let's move here in February. And then they experienced a June and, you know, oh shit, what did I just do? Well, thanks for moving me 6 inches from hell. But yeah, been in the desert since I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. And it's like a tractor beam, I believe, and just pulls you back. I think a lot like anyone would probably say that I think the desert music scene was born out of boredom. I mean, really, we all were skateboarding, but you can't really. I mean, back then it's a different place now. I think like half of the streets weren't even paved, you know, so you could only really skate somebody's empty pool or somebody would build a ramp in their desert backyard, and then it was sort of born out of finding something else to do with your time. And I think a big part of me starting. I think I was always into music. I think that just came from family and from people around me. And I think actually understanding that, oh, hey, we can do this too, was something that I probably got from watching some of the old farts, you know, and just getting into the early scene when you had like Mario Lawley and Alfredo and guys like that were, I mean, I remember seeing Across the River rehearse. You know, we used to skate over there and watch them, and it was kind of like, I'd already been playing guitar at that point. I started playing when I was about 9, but it never really occurred to me that it was that simple to, oh, I can just grab 3 people and plug in and we can just do this. And I think from that point on, I pretty much did. I think I just sought out other people that, it didn't even matter. I mean, one of my good friends at the time, I basically remember going up to him and saying, you're gonna play bass. And like I said, you're gonna ask your mom for a bass and that's what you're gonna do. Like, I'm playing guitar, so you're gonna play bass, and now our mission is to go find a fucking drummer. Like, you know, that's sort of where we started. What does punk rock mean? Well, that was probably the first musical influence that I would say I claimed as mine, like that I didn't get from my parents or an aunt or an uncle or some kind of influence. I think what punk rock really, our punk rock, like the desert punk rock, I think can mean a lot of things, because I think a lot of the bands that I would put in that category weren't necessarily like the Ramones or the Stooges or, you know, Sex Pistols or what people would call punk as far as an image. I think punk rock was a lot more of a spirit, like a willingness and an attitude and a freedom with, you know, I think the desert was unique to me, and why I think it's lasted as far as it's really still close to its origin as far as not really being tainted, is I think what we were able to accomplish was just, from an artistic standpoint, just don't be afraid to try something, and if it felt right, we did it, and we didn't really care about how it looked, or we didn't even know how it looked. I mean, so, you know, for the most part, I mean, I think my first 20 shows were usually on a pallet in the middle of nowhere, you know, with sand just whipping through everyone, and I think, you know, it was loud and it was rough and it was, but it embodied a lot of, I think, the spirit of what, where we all came from, which was born out of desolation, was sort of, you know, this unified spiritual, and in a way it was spiritual, not in the conventional sense, but, you know, I think there were a lot of bands that did things that you wouldn't say, oh man, that's punk, but if you saw them doing it, you would go, no, you know what, man, that's pretty much punk. I mean, I think I was knocking on that door at about the age of 12. I really wanted to be in the music scene. I think I had an older stepbrother. I had a lot of friends that I'd known that were a few years older, and I was lucky in that regard, where a lot of it was started with skateboarding. We would go up to what I call the colony. Some people would know it as the Nude Bowl, and we would, you know, skate around, and you sort of met everyone. And I think the party scene was born out of that, really. Like, hey, you know what? Nobody comes up here. This would be a cool place to like have a party, and we can throw lights on the pool, people can skate, the bands can set up here, and you go from there. And I think the first band I ever did a show with, we didn't even have a singer. We were about 15, and Mario said, you know, we just begged, like everyone, like I think Ian Taylor and Brian Maloney were like, man, can we just play? We don't even care when, you know, and like Unsound was probably the kings of the colony back then. I think that you always wanted to be anywhere where they were. And I think, yeah, they eventually said, yeah, man, fuck it. You can go on at like 5 o'clock, you know, like, so, you know, we basically played to the skaters and their girlfriends, but, you know, it got it started. And I think my origin was from there, and then Lung Cookie at about age 16, and from Lung Cookie, Polyphemus, and on and on and on and on. You know, I think that's about how it started. Well, WAXY to me, I think, is full. It just embodies sort of the continuation of the spirit of everything that we've always done in the desert. I think when you talk about from an origin to it enduring to what it's become, I don't think the people have changed much, which is why I think the music hasn't changed much. I think even though we're a little older, we might have some gray hairs, we might have some kids. You know, we've got some obviously things in life that distract you, but I think that the time that we came from, the place that we come from is still very much just in our DNA. I don't think you ever really lose that. So I think that's probably where, to me, what WAXY is doing right now is just taking the spirit of something. I don't really think we sound like we did last year. You know, I mean, I think it's an evolving thing. So I think that when you have mutual respect for one another and mutual influences, and then also different influences, what happens when you put that in the room is you're cooking a stew of everyone's input. I think when you're in a democratically inspired situation and everyone has a little bit of freedom to put a stamp on it, I mean, the new WAXY record's going to have a lot of elements that haven't been on any other WAXY record, which I'm pretty excited about. Right, I actually love playing bass. I think that, you know, a lot of people do come up to me and they're like, wow, weird seeing you on the bass. And to me, it's not really that weird. I think that, I think I've always been interested in being a musician, not really interested in being a guitar player. And actually, as I get older, I'm more interested in being a songwriter. Like, I don't really even think I quantify how good I do on any particular instrument. To me, they're just tools. So, and I love being a part of the rhythm section, particularly in what we do in WAXY, because I think there's a lot of room and there's a lot of the story gets told through the rhythm. And it was fun for me and challenging to explore that as a starting on the guitar. And really, I think my first goal 5-6 years ago when I started playing bass for WAXY was to not sound like a guitar player playing bass. And I think that that's sort of been the fun part of the journey, which is really just trying to approach this as what I think a bass player should sound like. You know, and that's where that's why it's been unique. It's been fun. You know, but I don't really even think about it. To be honest, it's just I'm playing songs I love. I don't really care what I'm playing it on. You know, it doesn't really even occur to me sometimes that I haven't picked up a guitar in 3 months, you know, until I do, and then I'm like, oh shit, I need to practice. But you know, it fits, it works, and I mean, I don't think any of us really just play one instrument. I think part of the fun with WAXY is that there's, sure, on stage we all have an assigned role, but I think in the creative process and in the recording process, it's kind of who's closer to it, and you know, like who happened to be here that day, and oh hey, by the way, can you just throw this down real quick because my fucking fingers hurt and I'm tired of doing it, and I think it gives us a little bit of that dynamic that you can't always bottle with one person put into a framework of what they do. The new WAXY, I'm excited. I think the new WAXY record to me is the first real WAXY record. I think there was always collections of songs and they were all over the map as far as when they were written. So I think this record is most interesting to me because this was a collection of material that came out within a 12 or 14 month span of time, as far as being, which gives it a cohesiveness that not to say the other records didn't sound good as records, but I think this one just really has a vibe that from track one to the final track, you're gonna see it as more a piece of work, not 12 songs on a CD. or a record. So I'm excited, and I think the songwriting's evolved. I think the chemistry between the players have evolved, and it's been fun to do. It's been fun to make, and hopefully when it's done, we can hang our hat and say, you know, I think we always try to approach it with, we're going to make the best record we can at the time, you know, so as long as, and I feel that we've done that. I feel that we've put in our best work that we're capable of at that moment, and I think it'll capture a moment in time where when we look back, I think this record will represent something special, and really, hopefully it resonates with fans the same way. I'm excited. I mean, I've been lucky in my career of playing music and being from here to have experienced a lot of seeing the world, and starting very young. I think my first tour I ever did, I was 17. I actually had to have my mom emancipate me to be able to do it because there were some kind of labor laws. And I think Australia's been on my bucket list for a long time as a place to go, and it's super exciting to go with so many good friends, because I think John and I have known each other for 20 years. I know I've known everyone in the band for just as long, and I mean, just from within the scene, and to have 8 or 9 of us that really kind of come from the same place to be able to go and experience this together is going to be unique. And from what I understand, the Australian fans just have an insatiable appetite for the desert story, the desert sound, and hopefully we're going to bring it, and it's going to be, I mean, I know we're going to bring it, but it's showing up. But I mean, I'm going to enjoy everything probably except the 20-hour flight that it takes to get there. But yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun tour. You know, I think they're pretty much prevalent in almost any, I mean, there's construction workers that take drugs, and hopefully not before they're building a house or something. But I think that the correlation was more in the beginning. I think when you're learning to sort of take an inspirational thing and filter it into a creative process, I think there definitely was something to be said for, had we not experimented and done some of these mind-altering sort of things, would the music sound the same? I mean, I don't know. You know, I know now that I'm older, we definitely play a hell of a lot better sober than we do. You know, I would say it's definitely not something that lends itself to your best work. But I think that had I not had it as a foundation, would the music sound the same? Probably not. I mean, I think it did have a correlation. I think, and that goes back to the 60s and the early psychedelic stuff. I mean, I think you had to, I think once you've experienced it, once your mind is open, I think it's open. I don't think that you really, I don't buy the fact that people, that when they say like, oh man, I can't do what I do unless I do this. And I think that's bullshit. I think that's kind of, to me, it's not true. Actually, I find that I do it a lot better, you know, now that I'm more focused on the trade. Because but there was a spirit and there was a time and there's a thing, and I think it's youth, and I think, you know, sex and drugs and rock and roll, the cliche, I think that it does carry as a theme because it is there. I mean, you're right. It's something that especially when you're young, I mean, the first time I went and set sail and went and toured, you know, I mean, hell, I was pretty much up for whatever, you know, and I don't have any regrets. I mean, I think you look back and go, I wouldn't be who I am and look at how I look at things now if had I not done it, you know. But is it necessary? No. I mean, you know, to be honest, there's some of my favorite players and some of my favorite bands, oddly enough, they weren't really heavy into that scene at all. I mean, you know, and you wouldn't know it. Like some of the people that, you know, when you talk about stoner rock or whatever they want to label it, I think those labels are interesting, you know, but and I think it's more about the fan base that the connotation is you tend to get more stoners listening to your music because maybe they're the people who kind of get it, you know, more so than have the open mind to say, hey, I'm going to listen to a 7-minute song. I mean, you don't really see that very often, like in the iTunes world. So I mean, but you know, is it necessary? Yeah, I don't think so. You know, I think that. At the end of the day, it's just music, and I think you know, and it's air. I mean, you know, we're pulling. Essentially, the way I view it is it was an idea, and it was an idea we took the time to do something with, and if it resonates with somebody, great. I mean, that's but we don't ultimately do it for that reason. So. My approach to songwriting, I think it's evolved over the years, but I think I always liked a Greg Allman quote when it came to like, how do you write a song? I just sit on the floor with my guitar and I don't get up till it's done. But I think if my process is usually, sometimes it depends. Like sometimes I'll have a melody that's kicking around in my head, or I'll have a part. Sometimes I'll actually have a lyric first. Like sometimes I used to do these exercises where you just kind of like write a line in the morning and then go back to that journal and just kind of write the next line and write the, you know, and just sort of, and we used to do it as a band as well, just to kind of like have the next person sort of do that. And it's always interesting to see sort of where that goes. But I think over the years, as to put it into practice and to actually have it be something that I've worked at, I think I don't try to pigeonhole a process. I think you just kind of wait for inspiration, and when it comes, just try your best to sort of bottle it. I think in WAXY's case, what's fun is working with 4 incredibly talented musicians and songwriters in their own right. I think the cool thing about WAXY is almost every person in WAXY is their own thing. We could literally probably be 4 bands, you know, and in some cases we are. Some of us do things on the side, but I think typically the process for WAXY would usually start with Robbie will be, hey, I've got this idea, check this out, you know, and he's always walking around like, oh man, listen to this, and we'll have like, he'll have a riff, and he might have a verse melody, and he'll just sort of ad lib and go, do you like that? What do we think? And you know, and if sometimes it's like, you know, it's all right, and we'll get into what we were originally working on. Normally we sidetrack our rehearsals 90% of the time with, hey, what do you think of this? And the next thing you know, we're kind of like, shit, we have this show tomorrow that we should be practicing, but now we're working on a song. I think you don't ever stop that. I think that's part of the joy and the fun of working and collaborating, which I think for me, I've always sort of done better work when I have people that I can sort of spar with. And I think it's important to have, you obviously have to check your ego at the door when you work with other people, but in a way, it's good that there are other egos, because sometimes you might go, that's good enough. And sometimes when you're working with other people, they're like, yeah, you know, man, that really could be better. I mean, that part, just because a part works doesn't mean it's great, you know. And I think with WAXY, we work tirelessly to sort of say, well, of course it fits, or we can do this on the next 8, or we can have the standard bridge where we just do this. But let's fuck this thing up. I mean, I think we always sort of have a skeleton of a song, and then we work really hard to try to like destroy that, and whatever's left in the wake is usually better. And that would be the best way I could answer our process, I think. Oh, having a studio is a blessing and a curse. You know, I think the blessing is obviously most bands would probably trade anything to be able to sort of have this place that you can come into, and I think we take it for granted more often than not, because it is a beautiful space to come in and work, and having all of the tools that you could ever need to really craft and create what you're doing is awesome. The clubhouse is what's really awesome. I think when we're all together, we're constantly working. I mean, even when we're not working, we're still working. And I think when you just look around anywhere you look, and it's just talking to you, it's like, hey, come on, let's. Now you'd think we would be a little more prolific, but I think, you know, it's hard to say. I think sometimes the clubhouse gets us in a funk, where I think sometimes we definitely sort of don't do as much. And I think when we get out of here every once in a while, it's like, oh hell, I mean, lately we've been rehearsing for these shows in Mike's garage, which has been like Bikram rock. It reminds me of being back in high school. There's no air conditioning. It's 130 degrees. You like literally are playing, now you're working, because you can't even fucking breathe. Like, so you're literally like, here we are, 6 inches from hell, and hey, let's go into where there's no airflow, no nothing. But you know, it's been some of the funnest, it's been some of the most fun I've had in years, actually going in, getting to the point. We're sweaty, but we're working, and we're like 5 feet away from each other, where I think in the clubhouse environment, sometimes, you know, we've got this giant room and everybody's sort of got their own little corner of it. And I think it was really cool to get back to a little bit of stripped down intimacy, and some cool material came out of that. And I think it's going to show when we take it on the road. I think parenthood is it's a wow thing, and it's undescribable, but what is definitely cool is your first inclination is, whoa, I can't wait to fill this vessel up with all of this cool shit that I'm into, and he's gonna be a musician, he's gonna do that. And you know, I've kind of, a lot of people around me have been like, oh man, he's gonna be amazing. I mean, by the time you look what he's around, or he's gonna get to grow up around. I'm like, well, I would love that. I want him to definitely experience music as a hobby, if nothing else. I think for anyone, it's good for the soul. But I don't necessarily wouldn't force him into liking something, you know. But it's there if it's there. And I think, God, I think we put headphones on my wife's stomach when he was in the womb. He's been listening to pretty much every Band of Gypsies, you know, Axis Bold as Love, a little Bob Dylan. I mean, there were so many things that he would kick and respond to. And now what's amazing is watching him listen to music. He loves it. I mean, if a live performance comes on the TV, he just stops, and, you know, and he'll literally get this kind of bounce going. And I think in a way he's become my new muse and my new judge. Like, I'll be working on a song and I'll kind of play it, and if he walks away, I'm like, oh shit, maybe I need to shelf that one, and then I'll try this other riff, and if I kind of get the baby nod, I'm like, okay, you know, my worst critic over here. But yeah, it's been awesome. You know? So far different from talking about the desert as a scene, the desert itself as a place was definitely a positive impact on the creativity. First of all, there aren't very many people that can relate to the fact that 800 people could just take a drive and set up this tribal sort of, contraption of a party and throw a lamp on an amp and just play till the sun comes up. I mean, that was definitely something that I think had a huge impact on anyone that ended up playing music in the desert. I think it was the freedom to explore. I mean, there were no rules. We didn't have to deal with a club owner saying like, you can't play that loud, or you can't play, you know, you guys don't sing, or you don't have this, or can you play Brown Eyed Fucking Girl? You know, I mean, the shit that you get when you play in a bar. I mean, we definitely all got to explore just whatever we wanted to. And I think 3 million stars and a full moon and a skyline like we have out here, and just vast, endless amount of space and dirt and dust. It definitely does. It does add to the magic of what I think that process is. I couldn't imagine growing up anywhere else. I couldn't imagine that I would have landed making the art that I do now without the desert. Like, it's just tied to it. I think to me, it's like Krypton. You know, it's like whenever I leave, you know, it's great to explore and it's great to get out of here, but it's that drive down 111 when you first come back from the airport and you start to see the mountain. And I think to me, the mountain holds so much mysticism to it. There's just an energy that whenever I see it, it's just like you just charge up, and it's like, okay, I mean, who if you can't create here, you probably need a different path. You know, I think that most people would agree that was the positive thing that came out of here, and the camaraderie. I mean, we really didn't have rules, and I think the biggest thing in the desert wasn't so much like, you really didn't, if you didn't sound like anybody else and you were kind of doing your own thing, you would get that nod of approval. And at least if you were reaching for something, I think you got a lot of respect, whether they liked it or not. I mean, anyone from Kai, I mean, we're all so different. You had Caius, you had Unsound, you had, you know, Across the River, you had Yawning Man, you had all, and I mean, when you just listen to any of that music side by side, none of it sounds to me the same. Like, I wouldn't even put most of it in one category. It's just, geographically, yes, like that. So it makes sense that there is something called desert rock because it all came from the desert. But to me, it doesn't sound like any one thing. I don't believe that there is a desert rock sound. I think it's a spirit. I think it's actually an attitude. I think it's something that just is born from dust and dirt and heat and you know, some people would say, well, I guess I would say a little bit of boredom, but a little bit of freedom, a whole lot of freedom, because I mean, we really could go out and do these things and nobody really cared, you know, like, so we could be, unless we lit the mountain on fire, which we did manage to do a couple times, then they start caring, you know, but, and when that scene ended, you know, it was very short. I mean, it was really a few years, and you could probably say there was maybe 30 parties, you know, total. I think that they would happen like every couple of months, and to have no cell phone technology or any of the things that we have today, the fact that you could even word of mouth get people to all convene in some random weird way the hell out their location is pretty amazing in its own right. And I mean, when I try to remember, that's the problem with us, is we gotten a little older and things are a little fuzzy. I don't really remember exactly how it used to happen, but you know, it would happen. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the magic, and I think that's what I think interests a lot of the questions that we get the most are really about that one little slice of the pie, which is, tell me about the generator parties.